Welcome to Overnight Wisdom, a show where we sit with changemakers, artists, business leaders, and thinkers. Each conversation is an invitation to slow down, to go deeper, and unearth the quiet insights that shape who we are. If you're seeking honest reflections, unexpected wisdom, and a deeper understanding of what it takes to not merely survive, but to thrive, you're in the right place. We pulled it off. The 2025 Diversify Summit happened, and it was beautiful, bold, necessary, but also it was exhausting, quietly heartbreaking in some moments, and deeply clarifying in others. In this episode, I sit down with Sayantani, my colleague and my co-creator, to reflect on what it really took to bring this summit to life. We talk about the things people don't see, the weight of building with limited funds, minimal staff, and hopes that sometimes went unmet. The pressure of being visible while carrying everything quietly. The moments we cried, the moments we almost quit, and why we didn't. This is a conversation about radical responsibility, about leadership when you feel like you're leading on empty, about the people who surprised us and the ones who disappointed us. It's about setting boundaries, choosing ourselves, and still choosing joy, because hope is a strategy. If you've ever built something out of nothing, if you've ever shown up even when you felt forgotten, if you're learning to lead with both heart and spine, this episode is for you. It's not a story about perfection. It's a story about truths. This is Overnight Wisdom, and this is what it meant to us to keep going. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome today to a special episode with my colleague, Sayantani. And today we will be talking about all things Diversify Summit. For Sayantani, I wonder maybe people should meet you actually. So who are you?
Hello, everybody. I am Sayantani. I've had the privilege of being on Overnight Wisdom twice. I am a senior manager at Diversify. I am originally from India, but I have lived in Norway now for 5.5 years, and I have been working with Diversify for almost 4 years. I feel like it's been forever, but I think I'd say 4 years. No?
Yeah, I always find it interesting when you say originally as though you're no longer from
I
India.
know that's true.
You are still from India.
No, I'm very much from India still.
So Diversify, I guess maybe just a frame around, just in case you have people listening to this who do not know what Diversify is. Diversify is a nonprofit organization that I founded 8 years ago and we work on 4 main pillars. We work on economic justice, health,
Migration and society.
there you go. Migration in society and global inequalities. And we look at things like democracy. We look at things like climate justice, for example. And from Diversify, we've had a lot of verticals that have offshooted from it. So we have a limited liability company, so for-profit organization or company called Diversify Consults, where we do direct consulting with larger organizations. So we've been privileged to work with some of the biggest brands in the world. And one of the verticals that came out of it is Diversify Summits, which has now become, for all intents and purposes, the largest gathering in the Nordics for the conversations that we engage in. And it's an annual conference that we do, and people fly in from all over the world. And this year was our 4th year doing it. And this year was also the hardest doing it. But before we jump into like the difficulty of it all, what is Diversify Summit to you? Like, what do you think? How do you feel about the conference as a whole, especially because we've attended a lot of different conferences? And what do you think makes it unique?
When I first joined Diversify, I joined as an intern, and my first day I remember so well. I was in the office, and I was just learning how to do things. And Chisom comes into the office. She just had a meeting with somebody, and she's come in, and it was 2021 October, if I'm not wrong. Very passionately talking about this idea that she has, this conference she wants to do, and then a gala to follow it. And I was like, wow, I was so like amazed, And then there was COVID. but we still did the summit in September. So it was quite new, but I remember it so vividly, the passion with which Chisom came in and spoke about it. And she's like, we're going to have I don't know how many people. I think you said you're going to have more than 500 people. And in my head, I was just like, this woman is crazy. How are we going to have 500 people? There's COVID, there's things happening. But then we did. We had, in the first year, we had around 800
550.
or
No, no.
550. Yeah. 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 We had 550 people. So I've had also the privilege to see the summit grow each year. And each year, my responsibilities have increased. And I think we've always done it with a smallish team. And I don't think people understand how much effort we put into it, especially because we do everything in house. There is nothing that we don't do on our own.
Mm.
And I don't think people understand when you look at the summit, when you attend the summit and you see how large it is and the production. I don't think people understand that it's this tiny team behind it. And especially this year, we were a team of how many people, Chisom? Two and a half.
2.5.
As your husband reminded me when I said we were a two-woman team. He's like, we're two and a half because, we have to count half of him.
Yes, yes, yes. No, it's interesting actually just taking me back to that because I know also how I am and how my ideas come because I mull on them for a bit and then I'm just like, I'm doing it. Like once I decide, and I feel like, of course, like I know I came into the office and I said that and people looked at me like, what is she on about? You know? And I'm like, I'm going to do it because I've thought about this. It's nagged me for years. I'm going to do it because I've always wanted to create a better space, a more meaningful space. I'm often at a lot of conferences where I'm speaking or even sometimes also attending where, you sit there and you're just like, what am I doing here? In terms of everything is just fluff, up here. And I was missing something. So I think I complained so much about how lifeless a lot of these gatherings were. And as is norm, when something nags me long enough, I have to do something about it. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And yeah, it was crazy, but I absolutely knew that we could do it. And of course, I think as you say, and I think in previous years, we've had like 10, maybe 13
Yeah.
people working on it. And also just to qualify that the summit is such a small part of our work, but it's something that we work on all year round. Like you're done with the conference and then you start planning already for the year after.
Mm.
And it's about maybe 5 to 7% of our work.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of effort. And I think, as you also articulated, basically everything happens in house. The only thing that we outsource is on the day for the production of the event, where we bring in technicians to ensure that the mics and all of that stuff and the recording goes well. But otherwise, everything up until that point, we do it. The
Everything.
designs, we do it ourselves. So it's been an incredible amount of work and also an incredible amount of learnings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think makes our conference unique?
Something that I take for granted, because in Norway, this is the only job I have had, right? So I have had the privilege to work in a space where I have seen a lot of different identities, different people represented, whether it's in our team, whether it's in the events we do, the speakers. So I think I have begun to take it for granted that if we have an event, we just know we're going to have as many people represented, but that's not the reality for a lot of people. So especially when you have people come up to you and say that, oh, it was so nice to see so many different people represented, it's so nice to see somebody like me on stage. For me, that feels very normal because that's what I see in all our events. And I think it's so important to see yourself represented in the work that you do on stage, to be inspired, to see that it's possible even for me. And I think that is one thing I think that makes our conference unique. What other thing makes our conference unique? I would say there's so much heart that goes into this conference. We think every small thing out, and how people feel is very, very important to us. We want them to feel seen and we want them to feel heard. I think we as a team at Diversify, we are so good at putting at community building. Yes, we have very, very intelligent speakers, and there is a lot of learning, but it is, for me, it's how you make people feel at the end of the day is what people will always remember. And we do a very, very good job at making people feel seen and welcome and heard.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think, I guess maybe just to stretch that a bit further as
Mm.
well is yes, we articulate how we want people to feel, but we know that saying we want people to feel seen or heard is not enough. We
Mm.
design it. We design those emotions in how we engage, in how we show up, even in the questions our speakers have to answer. I think it's also the time and the efforts that goes into, for example, every panel discussion in terms of we talk to each person
Mm.
individually and then we put them together in a panel of people who have very different perspectives from them. And what we also do, I think, is we join the prep conversation, then we put them together to have a prep call. After the prep call, we also put the questions together in collaboration with the moderator, send them to people ahead of time so everyone has the time to reflect on
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And it's important that at our conference, people who have been to our conference know that you really have to prepare because we ask hard questions. We're not going to ask questions around like the sky is blue. We know it's blue. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to address like what are the things that we don't talk about. And each year we also try to create space that aligns with the theme that we are engaging with. So this year the theme was courage in action. And it's interesting how we picked this topic last year without anticipating the chaos and the cluster F that this year was going to be. And also just being incredibly grateful for that foresight in a sense or that anticipation.
Yeah.
But I also have to say, like, it was really difficult for me to really articulate what I wanted to say this year. Like, I think in previous years, I knew what I was going to say, like, weeks ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, I was still grappling the day before. What do I want to say? What does courage in action mean in 2025? And I think we're going to break that down in terms of
Mm.
like, what was our actual experience,
Mm.
with creating this conference this year. And I do also want to say, just to also piggyback off what you said around, I think there's something quite beautiful about how emotionally resonant it is for people. Like every year, I know it's our conference, but I have not seen at any other conference just how emotionally invested and resonant the conversations that we have shapes people. There are people who are sharing that they learn more at our conference, which is one day, than they learn in the entire year. So I think we're incredibly proud of that. And I often think about, how do I show up in this space? How do I open the stage? Because how I show up and do that welcome keynote impacts what happens afterwards, how people show up in courage, how people show up in vulnerability, how people show up in authenticity. And so that's often something I grapple with, like which version of Chisom needs to embody
Mm.
what needs to happen in this conference today. And I think 4 years in a row we've managed. So I'm pretty proud of that.
I was going to say that was actually it was what I was going to ask you also. I think for me, it's how you open the day also sets the tone for the rest of the day, and how you can go up on stage and be so vulnerable in front of so many people. I think every year I've had tears in my eyes after your opening keynote, either in the beginning or in the end, of both times. But yeah, I think it's how you set the tone, and how brave or vulnerable you are is so important. And you set that tone and you give people the permission to be also vulnerable and show up how they want to show up.
Right. Thank you. I try. I try at least to show up as myself and whatever I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling on the day. So I'm glad it checks in, which is good. So just to jump into some of the questions that we want to reflect on today. The first one I have, I think we have questions for each other that we want to trade, and
Yeah.
then we reflect on what comes up. What do you think that success with this summit cost you? Something that no one saw.
A lot of sleepless nights and exhaustion.
It was towards the end though. It was just
Yeah,
towards
yeah,
the
yeah.
end. It was like more
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
the 3 weeks leading up to it or 2 weeks leading up to it.
Yeah, yeah. It I guess October is what it is, right? Like
Yeah.
it's the reality of it. We're a small team. We as a team, we want to do a good job and we want to do better than what we've done last year. So we've also set very high standards for ourselves. And also just as a person, when I have something big coming up, and we're also passionate about it, we love what we do and we want it to be a certain way, and we'll do everything in our power to make that successful. So I guess the flip side of that is also a lot of sleepless nights and exhaustion because you're so stressed about how you want the day to go. So I think what it has cost me is also seeing the truth in people and uh, the truth in the people around you. Sometimes people don't show up like you would want them to or you would have expected them to. So I think that is also something that I realized through this process.
How do you mean truth in people?
I've been reflecting on just community because like it's something I mean we do a lot. We're always building spaces for our community, and I've been reflecting on what it is to be a part of a community. And we all want to be a part of something. We want to belong, but being a part of a community and sustaining a community is two very, very different things. And everybody wants to be a part of it, but not everybody puts in the time and effort, or even I would say the money to sustain a community. And I think that is the difficulty in it. You have to be willing to put in your effort, time, even when sometimes it may be difficult. It's easy to show up when everything is great, and when things are not. I mean, I come from a culture, and you too, we come from cultures where community is such a central part of life. And that's what you see. You don't just show up when it's easy for you, right? You also show up even when it's hard, but your community needs you. And I feel like that is what I sort of see lacking. And this is something I've been reflecting a lot on, just generally, maybe also where I am in life now, and also with the summit and putting this together this year, especially since it was so hard for us. What about you, Chisom? How do you see this play out?
I mean, I think if I reflect on the same question, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like what has it cost me, I think it's a process, yeah, where like I also shared, I think I share similar sentiments around that sense of losing faith in community,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time recognizing that I still have community. I still have people who have my back and I still have people who show up for me. Maybe the disappointment is it's not the people you expect, actually, but maybe not the disappointment. I think maybe the surprise. So it is a surprise and a pleasant surprise for the people who actually show up. And for the people who don't, you know, it's not, it's a disappointment in that I think for me, I also had to realize where I had expectations. And I'm not a big fan of having expectations of people. I like to be realistic about I think like I'm very self-sustaining and that's how I like to operate. And I guess in some sense, especially just because it's been really difficult for us and in terms of geopolitically working in a space around equity and even say inclusive AI or things like this, it's not the geopolitical year for this, in a sense. And I think it wasn't so much the lack of support, it was a lot of the silence, like there was a lot of silence
Mm-hmm.
and I got a flurry of messages on the day from people. And I thought, I don't need your support right now. I'm doing the thing. I'm here. It's happening. When your message would have been useful would have been a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago, you know? And I think for me that it's been quite an interesting process just unpacking that for myself, recognizing the space where I still need to grow in terms of where I still have expectations of people, and then letting go of those expectations. Because I don't like to have expectations of people, but I think it's also clarified for me who my people are. I feel like the universe has a way. I feel like 2025 has just been, a hectic year for a lot of us across the world, but it's also been very meaningful. And it's given me space to learn and evolve. And I've had to meet myself in the mirror a lot of times to reflect and unlearn and move forward. This year, I prayed to the universe a really hard prayer around show me my people. And so when things like this happen and I'm feeling disappointed, I'm thinking, yo, did you not pray for this? Like this was what you asked for and the universe is responding. So
Mm,
for me, I kind of just see it as affirmative. And there are a lot of people who've shown up in many ways this year
that's true.
that I did not expect to show up.
That's
So
true.
it's been clarifying in that sense. I
Mm-hmm.
think in terms of what it cost me, it's just, of course, there's that stress. There was that grappling with, do we want to do this? Do we not want to do this? Is it what doing this? It's really expensive to put
Mm.
a conference together. I think people just really see the glitz and the glamour on the day. They don't see the stress that leads up to it. Every little detail, because we're so involved, well, we basically designed the entire thing, and having to do that against financial constraints, lack of funding
Mm-hmm.
is especially like it's difficult, period, even when you're swimming in cash. But when you're not swimming in cash in a year where, it's difficult to secure funding, it's even more challenging. So I think, of course, for me was that grappling of, do I want to do this? But me, I'm stubborn. So I'm thinking, if I'm going to go out, in a sense, I want to do it on my own terms. And I know that a lot of other conferences in the Nordics, across Europe, canceled because, like us, they couldn't secure funding because it's a difficult year period for that. But there was a part of me that I knew it was going to be hard to cancel. I knew it was going to be hard to quit it in a sense. And I knew it was going to be harder to do it. And I chose harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I'm glad we did it.
I'm glad to. I feel like for me, I very rarely will say no to things. So when we were also grappling with should we do it, should we not do it, I was like, yeah, yeah, we can do it. Like I think if you ever came up and be like, Shantani, let's start selling dog shit, I'll be like, yes, Chisom, let's try that. you know, I don't think like I want to try everything before I'm like, okay, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So
I guess
and I
it's that
think
mentality, right? It's
yeah, yeah,
maybe that's
and
also
I
why
think
we
both
work
of
well
us.
together.
Yeah, that's all. That's what I was going to say. I think both of us have that a bit that we'll try everything. I guess that
Yeah.
helps.
I mean, it's only impossible until you try. And I want to know it's
Exactly.
impossible. I want to say I tried and it's impossible,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
because there's that thing I feel like if we had actually just said no and not move forward,
Yeah.
we'd never know. And I feel like we'd grapple with that regret in a sense, like
Yeah.
what if? Sure, we would have slept more in the past three
Yeah.
weeks. But yeah, I'm glad we did it on our own terms and that felt meaningful in a sense,
Yeah.
so to say. Was there a point where you questioned whether the summit would actually happen and what do you think kept you going?
Oh my God. I think I questioned it every month until it happened. I mean, until maybe September, we were still grappling with, okay, should we do this? Are we going to do this? There's no money. How are we going to do this? I mean, while we were still planning it and in our heads and, we were working on it, there was always, I think every time we lost some funding, it felt like, I remember this one day when we lost some funding and you and I
So
were
let's
on a
let's
call.
reframe that. It's not so much that we lost the funding. So we had funding walking into the year. We had a lot of funding for the summit.
For the summit.
And then the US administration happened. And unfortunately, a lot of companies had to pull
Had
out.
to pull back. Yeah. 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 So when one of when that happened, I remember one of these days when we were on a call, I think I have never felt so sad and like my heart was so heavy for days because we had it and then it was gone. So I think that was the worst day for me. Like, how are we ever going to do this? Because we started the year with the biggest plans for the summit this year, and then each month it kept going. You see a little piece of it gone, and then another piece of it gone. And then by the end, we're like, are we really going to do this?
Yeah.
But I am glad that we did it. I mean, it was
Mm.
smaller than what we usually do, but it was such a boutique experience, and
Yeah.
I did enjoy having one stage. So, I
Yeah.
mean, during the summit, we usually have simultaneous stages, which is also
We
great.
only had
But I
one
loved,
this time, like one
yeah,
simultaneous stage
yeah,
happening,
yeah,
yeah, during the break.
yeah, exactly. So I did enjoy that a lot.
I guess also just to
What
frame,
about you?
like our first year with the summit, we had 550 people. Our
Yeah,
second year, we doubled. So we're around, I think, 1,100.
yeah,
And last year, around 2,000. So we've always
2000.
doubled the summit. And this year, we had to go down. I think that for me, similar to you, it's what was hard was to see things taken away. Because it's
Yeah.
one thing, like, if you don't have the funding, yeah, you don't have the agreement signed. And then it's like, okay, it's a hustle to secure it. But when we've done the hard work of securing those contracts, and then something happens that is beyond our control, then we're thinking, oh my gosh, every week or so there was a bad news. So like we lost a lot of the support and the sponsorship because yeah they were also struggling, and I
Mm,
understand that. Like I don't want to even demonize these companies in any way, form, or means. It's a tough year for all of us, and I understand, and I understand why they also had to make the decisions that they made. It's also for their own sustenance and sustainability, and for the security of the jobs for their people, which I completely understand. So I think for me, I struggle with giving up. So it's I had to choose the person that was hopeful every single day. So I
mm,
had days where I was just like, what am I doing? This. Like, just, I don't want to do this. I don't, it's too stressful. It's too exhausting. And then there's also just the what if? Why
yeah,
not? Why not
yeah.
try? And I think that is innately who I am. It's not over until it's over. And I knew we could persevere. I mean, we still in we secured some funding
Mm-hmm,
eventually, but only about one quarter of what the conference cost us. So of course there are bills to pay.
mm-hmm,
In a sense, it's yeah, just still incredibly grateful that we're even able to get anything, especially
mm.
in this year where everybody else was understandably could not move forward. So yeah,
I have a question for you, Chisom.
ask away.
What failure or challenge are you still emotionally or strategically processing even now?
I don't think any failure. I think challenge for me, maybe the challenge would be I am absolutely certain that I am not going to do another conference without having all the money for that conference in the bank. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. Like, I'm 100% sure on that.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I think that just the struggle of hustling, it takes away the joy of what we're building. On the day, the joy is there, but up
Mm,
until that, it takes away the joy. So I think for me, just understanding what my boundaries are and what I have capacity for emotionally, because now I have a lot of things going on. I'm writing a book, I'm starting a new company, I'm still running
mm,
three other companies, simultaneously, and working a lot with a lot of different clients. It's like I don't have capacity, and I still have to be a great mom and a wife and a friend and a leader. So I think I am not the type of person that detaches easily. I can detach easily
mm,
from things that I don't have control over. But trying to create space in a way that is meaningful, it
mm,
can be quite all consuming. And I'm the type of person that gets consumed with everything I do. And I can get consumed with 50 things simultaneously at once. Yeah. And bring the same rigor and passion to all of it. And also just recognizing that as much as I have the capacity for that, I don't need to take it all on. So it's like, what are my non negotiables? What are the things
mm,
that I need to focus on? And what other things do I let flow and
mm,
move? You know? So I think for me, that is one challenge that I reflected on, in that I am not going to do this again, in terms of I will not struggle for the funds. I will secure the funds before I do the thing. Um, And I think as well, it's not a challenge, but I think I know I've come out of this experience and this year a different person.
Mm,
I know that I have to audit the relationships and the friendships in my life. And I'm grateful for that. It was challenging. It's
mm-hmm.
interesting, yeah. Like before the summit last Friday, it was difficult to think about and like, oh my gosh, I have to audit. I have to let people go. And
Yeah,
now on the other side of the summit, I'm like, yeah, that's what we got to do.
yeah,
Like it's like night and day for me.
yeah.
I'm just like, okay, I'm done.
But why do you think that is?
I think for me, it's clarity.
Mm,
I want to have good people in my life. And I like to think that in my own way, I nourish my community and the people, in my life as best as I can. So it's not really kind of like, for me, it's not so much that it needs to be like reciprocal relationship in a sense, because we arrive where we arrive and sometimes you give more than others. But to some friendships that I have felt extracted from, especially this year. And so I think there's that need for a pause for me. So the question you did ask me was what shifted between then and now. I
yeah.
think I have headspace to reflect, because then I'm reflecting a little bit on it, but then I have to focus on the summit or something else or client work. And now that the weight of the summit is gone, I have more headspace and to clarify for myself that, okay, what do I need? This is what I prayed for. How do I receive it? How do I open myself up for the good things and the good people
Mm,
currently in my life and those about to come?
mm,
Mm,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. What about you?
Guess for me, I never want to not feel the joy I feel in creating and co-creating these spaces. And if we continue to create them like we did this year, I lose that joy or the passion or the want to do it. And that is also why I said exhausting. It was not just exhausting like physically, just emotionally to do this was exhausting this year. And I never wanted to feel like a burden.
Mm.
So I think that was my challenge.
I think it's also maybe interesting to name here that what also leads to exhaustions is the lack of funds. You're trying to build, when you're creating or designing a big
Mm-hmm.
conference, it comes with costs. We're not even thinking about the cost of our time. We're thinking about the cost of the venue, the cost of the food, the cost of, flying speakers in, the cost of the
Mm,
technology, the cost of advertising, marketing,
mm-hmm.
all the documents that you need, or even things as simple as the agenda for the day. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of logistics and work to put together. And in a year where you don't have that, and then it has to come out of
Yeah,
our own pockets, then it's challenging because you're thinking, why am I doing this? And of course we have tickets to sell, but of course you also see in some capacity some people can't afford it. So there are just financial challenges all around. And I think we also have to acknowledge and name that we live in a capitalistic world. And
exactly.
oftentimes when you create spaces, people just expect those spaces for free, not recognizing that it actually costs something for that space to be created. And then it's how do I contribute? And I
Mm-hmm.
guess maybe that's what you were talking about earlier in terms of like, how do I sustain this community that has sustained me for many years? So I think, and that takes different form. But I think for us, what was exhausting was just the financial constraints.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's like, where do we get this money? We don't want to have to get money out from our company, or because this is something that should fund itself, even when it does not necessarily fund our work and our time. Like we're happy to do this because we're passionate about it. But then what? What would you do differently if you had to build this summit again with the same budget and timeline?
Not do it again.
With
Not
the
do it
same
again.
with the same
Not
budget? Nah, not happening.
not happening.
No, no, definitely. I think so. I would not do it. That is what I would do differently. If we had to do it with the same budget, the timeline was okay. The budget was unrealistic.
Yeah.
And that was
They're
what made
quick
it really
workers.
difficult. Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
get things
Yeah.
done. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
cannot believe how well
Yeah.
we get things, but we're also really good at what we do, not just with the conference, just with work in general. But yeah, if I had to do it differently, definitely not going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same. With
Yeah.
the same budget, never.
With the same budget. Never, never again. Where did you compromise and was it worth it?
I don't know. I don't think we compromised as such.
I think the compromise was to decide on having a smaller conference.
Yes, that.
Yes.
But I mean, even with what resources we have, we will, we'll do everything in our power to still make it
Yeah.
as good as it
Yes.
is
Yeah.
when there were 2,000 people.
Yes.
There, we never
Yeah.
compromise.
Yeah. That
And
is
we
true.
didn't.
That is true. So we didn't compromise. I think the only compromise was just accepting that, we did not want to gather 3,000 people because that required a lot of work and resource and, like having to manage multiple stages. And we decided we just wanted to have one stage and then one simultaneous session during the break.
Hmm.
So, yes, that was more or less the only compromise that we made.
Another question for you, Chisom. What truths about leadership did this summit expose for you that theory or strategy could never have taught?
Mm, good question. Leadership is hard. I've always known this. I don't think it is articulated enough.
Mm,
I think that oftentimes there's a separation from how people see leaders and the realities that they face. I think, of course, when you choose to become a leader or when you have that positional power, there's a responsibility that comes with it. So I'm not saying that anyone should feel sorry for leaders necessarily, but I think that leadership actually requires a lot of there are things around like communication, honesty, vulnerability, but the actioning of the values that you believe in or you feel affirmed in. I'm also trying to reflect as I'm talking about,
mm,
what I think it's hard. Leadership is hard. It's not easy having to make decisions, having to make tough calls. I've had to make a lot of tough calls this year, even outside of the summit. I've had to let people go. So I think for me, it's just leadership is something that I grapple with and I try to do as best as I can. And one of the best ways I can do it is to show up authentically as myself
mm,
in the sense where I have to make the hard calls and I have to also take responsibility. So I'm big on radical responsibility. So if a situation happens, even though I'm not like on paper at fault, I often reflect on what is this here to teach me? How did I participate in this behavior? How did I enable this to happen? What is my role? So I think for me, this year has sharpened me in sense of leadership is also about taking that sense of radical responsibility that if I share a space with anyone, their behavior, whether I have a direct or indirect impact on it is relevant. But I
mm,
also need to be able to reflect and say, how did I allow for this behavior to continue to thrive? So that's one of the things that this year has taught me in terms of leadership. And I think as well that leadership requires audacity. Yeah, like it requires a bit of gumption. Well, a lot of
mm,
gumption, like a lot of grit. And especially in a year where everyone is, walking on eggshells. I think I've become even more vocal, this year because for me it's maddening to, I'm a silence is agreement kind of person. So if there's something that's happening and I disagree and I say nothing, it means that I agree. So it's like, how do I use my voice? How do I leverage it? How do I speak truth? It's power, but
mm,
how do I also do that with grace and understanding? I'm not one to judge most of the time, like judge people. I always try to hold grace. So, I think for me, I'm still unraveling in my journey in all the good ways. But I think this year is sharpening me a lot. And I think just that intense sense of responsibility. I think I've always kind of been like this, yeah, where I take responsibility for everything that happens in my life. Everything can happen to me. I get to respond. I get to choose. I will not be at the mercy of somebody or a system or a structure. And I don't
mm,
ask for permission. Yeah, so that's one of the things that has also been reinforced this year for me. It's one of my go-to things. Like if you ask me, how did you end up here? Have you created anything you've created? It's like, I don't ask for anyone's permission. I'm going to do it. Like, you either support or get the hell out of my way, but it's going to happen, you know? So, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think I'm still learning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for me, just in working with you, I feel like I always see you, even if you're scared, like, do it anyway, do it in spite and despite the fear. And you also have like this special ability to like show your vulnerability, which I think is so important for leaders. And a lot of leaders don't do that. So, I mean, there've been so many times this year where, you've been like, I don't know how we are going to do it, but we're going to do it and trying to figure it out together. So, I have felt like a co partner with you in this more than anything.
And you've been a great partner. I meant what I said in the summit. I think it's, I mean, if you were a naysayer, if you're like, oh, I don't know, I'd still do it anyway. But it's so refreshing not to have to convince.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think we've had colleagues in the past where we've also had to convince and call. It's like
yeah,
pulling teeth, right?
yeah.
And I think to have that space where it's like, okay, we're going to jump. How high? So I think that has been
Yeah, yeah,
very beneficial, that sense of
yeah.
shared hope. And I think, yeah, that's another thing I've learned this year is hope is a strategy. And it's something I keep
I love
saying
that.
now, like
Yeah,
it is an absolute strategy,
yeah.
and I think in spite of everything that's happened this year and the challenges we've had with regards to the summit, and everything else just in terms of relationships or some of our team members we had to let go, like we feel all the pain and still choose joy. And so for me, that was just that radical sense of
Mm.
I will go through this, I will cry. I have cried so much this year, you
You and me
know,
both.
yeah. And I still choose joy and I
Yeah,
still choose
yeah,
hope. And I also just want to say, I remember when we got, so this year, Google returned for the fourth year in a row as a partner. The only company that actually did, which we were very thankful. I remember when I got that call, because I figured, oh gosh, nothing is going to happen. All these
yeah.
companies, I understand the year we're dealing with. And I got that call that, hey, we can do something, we can give you some support. And when I got off that call, I literally just cried. No, I think it was a text message. And I literally just cried, just like, oh my gosh, like it's not covering all the costs, but I think just to feel seen, to feel like people, an organization like that really has our back,
Mm,
like in a year where it would have been easy and understandable
mm.
that they did not continue and they couldn't support that they walked the walk, that yeah, they're rooting for us in all the ways. I think that was such a pat on the back, that was such a good feeling. It was a relief.
Such a
It was a really great thing. Yeah. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah. What conversations or behaviors made you question the sustainability of your generosity? And it could also just be outside of the summit as well. Like this year, like what behavior has made you question how generous can I be?
how honest can I be?
You can be very honest.
My God, I think just how much I have given and given and given and, you know, trusted. I think I've trusted in people too easily and given at the cost of my own happiness or joy or my own well being. And the worst part is also convincing myself when I'm doing that, oh, this is, the right thing to do. Now when I look at it in hindsight, it's quite scary for me that I have this ability to convince myself that it is the right thing. Like people say, you have this gut feeling that it's wrong. I think I have this overpowering, voice in my head that is just justifying it in that moment. So I think it's just giving without and not setting boundaries. That is something I'm learning from you, Chisom.
But you're getting much better. You're tougher
I'm
this
getting so
year.
much better. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this year has made me. If there is a year in my life, I think even when I'm 80, if somebody asks me which was like a year that you'll always remember, I'm going to be like, it was 2025. It's the year that has made me. Like, I feel like there's nothing that can break me now, you
Hmm.
know? With everything we've gone through at work, I mean, even generally in life, just also the world, like, there is nothing in this. I shouldn't say it that
Don't
true in
jinx
public.
it. Don't
I'm
jinx
not saying,
it.
I'm
2026 is
not saying it, but you know what I mean.
no, but I think no, let's actually say it. Let's just manifest. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it gets better.
It
It
gets
gets
better.
more joyful. And yeah, absolutely. No, but I think like this year you've been really sharpened. I don't think you should lose that generosity of spirits which you have. Like you're really kind, you're really
Mm,
sweet, you're really thoughtful, like even among your colleagues, you're the type of person that cooks and brings to the office and shares. I think don't lose that because
yeah.
you've had a couple of I don't even want to insult swines or like, but you've just had a couple of really
Yeah,
unpleasant people who had taken advantage of that,
yeah, yeah.
so I think hold on to that because that's the thing is you get to choose how you respond. And I think when you give up that generosity of spirit that you have and that joy that you exude, they win. And
Mm,
they get to live in some sense rent free in how you move in your head and
mm,
how you engage
yeah.
because you're waiting always for somebody to mess up. I think boundaries are great and having them and knowing, like, so trusting that feeling, trusting your gut when it comes, but don't lose,
Mm.
the part of you that is joyful, you know?
That's true. That's true. But it's also, I feel like, despite everything this year, I think it's also been a very joyful year because when you have these challenges and you overcome them, and you have people show up for you, you have community, like I said, you mentioned that so many people have shown up, right? And you see, there are people who will have your back.
Mm.
It has been such an eye-opening and joyful year in that sense because when you are like we've overcome this hurdle, like thinking, are we going to do the summit, are we not going to do it, will we be able to do it, and we did it, and we are better for it, and it's and that brings joy. So in that sense, I think it's also been a very joyful year.
Yeah, I think it's been an incredibly clarifying year,
Mm-hmm.
validating year, affirming year. I mean, there are things I started my company, well, this new company, and I was going to do it in 3 years. Yeah.
Mm.
And then this year I was just like, why the heck am I waiting? What happens in 3 years? Who knows? So I think it's been a really clarifying year. And there's so much that is happening. I'm writing a book, also just like unpacking, reflecting, trying to heal doing this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
talking to people from all over the world, learning from them. And I think all changing my mind a lot. Right. And I think so
Yeah.
it's been a year to learn because I reflect on the things that I have changed in how I think or even how I act. And I'm like, last year, if someone had told me I would do this, I'd be like, no, and I think my boundaries are also firmer. And I think each year they get firmer, but this year they've been sharpened,
Mm-hmm.
like I take responsibility in that if I see a situation that has become like toxic, I take my responsibility in that. How did I allow this or why did I allow this? But
Mm-hmm.
the minute I identify it for what it is, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
Mm-hmm.
we're finished,
Yeah.
And I think this year, in some sense, and maybe that's what I needed this year, either just like that firm boundaries. Like I don't draw a line in the sand. I dig a damn hole.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think that has helped me also just preserve my own mental health and bring good vibes and juju my way, like just the right people. After everything this year,
Mm.
would you do another summit and under what conditions?
I would love to do a summit again. I love doing the summit. I love the spaces we create, how we do it.
Mm,
I would do it if, like you said, if we have the money in our banks to do it, not emotionally, financially, and physically exhausting ourselves or like losing ourselves in that process. That's not something I want to do. But
right.
I would love to do it again.
Right. Same. I think it would evolve. I think it will change. But of course,
Hmm.
I think just ensuring that at least the financial resources spoken for. What is one takeaway from the summit this year?
For me, I think my takeaways always come from your keynotes, Chisom. So for me, this year is radical responsibility. Taking responsibility for my part in everything that is happening and having the courage to do things despite the fear, and conquering things despite the odds.
Yeah, yeah.
And hope is a strategy, like you said.
Hope is a strategy. Yeah, it's maybe the next summit is like hope is a strategy. What was last year? Was it not something about
Scaling
hope?
hope.
Scaling hope. Yeah.
Scaling hope and belonging, was it?
Scaling hope, justice, and belonging, I think, what it was called. Yeah. Um, I
How
loved
about
a
you?
lot of everything. Every speaker was just phenomenal. The
Mm-hmm.
keynotes were out of the world. The
Yeah.
fireside chat, of course, Purnima, who's a darling, and Atina, the CEO of Google, was great. I think all the panel discussion I really loved. The first one, Courage and the Future of Work. I loved the one on investments and also the one on negotiating, the great cultural negotiation. I think that balance of people, we had Safia and they are brilliant, and we had
Yes.
Cecilia, who is just like straight talking, matter of fact, refreshing as hell. And of course, we had the ambassador. So I think just that put together of people was quite
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. But they couldn't have come from more different sectors. So that was an interesting get up. And I think, of course, like the speed pitches were also great. Sarah is amazing.
Yeah.
They were able to, yeah. I mean, Rihanna, who knew Rihanna could be in a whole keynote,
I
right?
loved that
Like,
keynote. It was so funny.
so good, so funny, so good.
Yeah.
No, so the whole thing, Chris, Agnese, Abhishesh, like
Mm,
the whole thing was absolutely phenomenal. I really loved, the first session with Fleming and Winter and Sarah.
Fleming.
So I really also liked that conversation. So obviously, I loved everything. All
Yeah.
great.
My God.
My God. I
It
mean,
was it was heartbreaking, inspiring, motivating, everything at once.
yeah, the man is like he takes you to church or mosques or whatever, the temple, and
Yeah.
his ability to, I mean, his voice, how resonant it is, and the way he talks, and the way he, what's it called? Is it like is it elocution? What is it called? Like
Elocution, yeah. Elocution, yeah. Yeah,
the
yeah,
way it's
yeah.
amazing, just the way he talks, like he stops you dead in your tracks, like
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
does that. And I think another person at our summit that does that, Ashla,
Ashak,
they
yeah.
have an
My
ability to
God.
just like stop you dead in your
Yeah, yeah,
tracks. All
yeah.
you do is just sit there and listen, and Momodu is just brilliant. And I'm not surprised, I'm just like in awe of the man. Yeah,
Yeah,
like he's
yeah,
brilliant. So yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What were some of like the mistakes, or some of the funny things that happened?
You know where I am. There will always be something funny that is happening.
I think the craziest thing that happened was the email situation, right?
My God, Chisom.
That was crazy. So we have like, we're connected to like the top CEOs in the country in shipping and maritime. And then my lovely colleague Sayantani, where we have their names, we have their first name and their last names, and names mean a lot to us, like we check it. And then for some reason, Sayantani is sending messages to top CEOs whose numbers and emails you don't normally have. Like it's hard to get. And we have it. And you were literally just writing the initials of their names based on the first thing based on their email.
What the emails were.
So imagine that my email says like CKA@diversify.no. Shantani is like, dear CKA.
Okay. But if I can say so, I checked. I forgot I had the name. So there was a name, and then I was like, this doesn't sound like a name, and maybe it's in another culture. So I was like, okay, let me Google it. And Google told me it's a name in Spain. So
And
I
then
didn't
you're
check
like,
the others.
it's a name in Spain. So it's a name. So that was, and then we got a message. Well, we got a response and they addressed you with your first and last name properly. I was like, ooh, in Norway, what is happening? Because in Norway, people just normally use first
Yeah.
names.
And I
And
didn't
then
even think that was odd
I knew
until
that
you
was
like
odd. I was just
pointed out.
like, okay, that's a lot. So that was funny that that happened. Anything else?
Funny in hindsight. Yes,
Funny in
of course there's
hindsight, like there was a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
stress because we had
yeah,
to repair, take accountability and repair and send a
yeah, yeah,
message.
yeah, yeah. Of course, there's more funny things when it comes to me.
What else happened?
The day before the summit, we do a speakers dinner, like a speakers gathering, which we did again this year. And of course, it's one night before the summit. We also go out of our way. So Chisom made candles for our speakers. So we were going to pick all of that up
Office.
from the office and just if any last minute printouts, doing all of that. So there's also there's Chisom's husband, her two kids, and then we were taking everything. And since the conference was at a hotel near the airport, so we were all staying there. So, okay, we were packing everything up and going. And then Chisom and me were the last one. And then Chisom asked me, do you have your suitcase? Go inside and check again. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm sure, your husband has taken it. And then she was like, no, but just go check. And I was like, okay, fine. And then I went in and I looked around and I was like, no, I think he's taken it. And then it took us 1 hour to get to the hotel. I reached the hotel and then Chisholm went to her room. I went to my room and I was like, oh, my suitcase is not here. Let me call her husband. And I was like, do you have my suitcase? And he's like, what? You didn't bring your suitcase? I was like, but I thought you got it. I checked the room. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I have to do a walk of shame and wear the same clothes all over again. I'm going to be the most unhygienic person. I don't have my brush. I don't know what to do. But luckily, Chisom is married to a very kind man. At 1 o'clock, he drove back to the office and then got me my suitcase. So I had new clothes to wear the next day.
Yeah, that was funny. Because I was like, I'm going to sleep. And I think he came back. I don't know, when did he
At two
come back?
o'clock, I think. I
2
think 2
o'clock?
o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. Did I do anything like crazy this time around? I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think you do a lot of
Yeah,
you're not,
I don't make a lot of huge mistakes.
yeah, you're not like a goof up person,
No, I'm very detail oriented. Like I like details, and
Yeah.
I try to be careful. I'm kind of like this realistic paranoid. So to say, it's just like, okay, what am I not
Yeah.
thinking about? No, but okay, what are you aspiring to in your personal life, Sayantani?
Oh, in my personal life,
Mm,
to be happy, not to take bullshit from people,
I love that.
give people what they deserve.
Hmm, right. That almost
So
sounds vengeful.
maybe it was maybe a little bit, no, but no, it's also the truth. Like
Is it
you
true?
give, if when you get love, you give love. I'm not going to give love to you if you're going to give me hate.
Yeah,
So just being honest about these things. I mean, I think women are so taught to be so sacrificial, and I am not that woman.
I love it. What are you aspiring to in your professional life?
To be very, very rich.
I love it. Speak on it. Yes. Yes.
Next year, we're going to have so much funding for the summit and for everything else that we do. We're going to be swimming in cash.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my hope for professionally.
Love it. All right. Thank you for joining me for this conversation. It's nice, I think, just to like reflect. I think we should do this more often. I mean, we've
Yeah.
done debriefs, but
Yeah.
not quite kind of like this. So this was quite nice. And we've done debriefs with like the larger team, but this is quite nice to do this. So
Yeah. Me too.
thank you for your time. This was nice.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course, anytime. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for spending time with us on Overnight Wisdom. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you pause, please leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're feeling generous, a rating or review goes a long way in helping others find us too. Until next time, stay curious, stay tender, and may the wisdom you need find you exactly when you're ready.